Okay, so in my first few mental percent videos, I taught you the little math ninja trick for 100%, 50%, 75%, and 25%. And those were all based on taking a 100% and cutting it into halves and then halves again. So that's not the only way we can perfectly cut up 100%. Another way we could perfectly cut up 100% would be into 10 equal pieces. So just really quickly imagine, I won't draw you the circle this time because it's really hard to cut a circle into 10 equal pieces, but I'd just like you to imagine that I broke 100% into 10 equal pieces. 100 divided by 10, of course we know 100 is made of 10 tens. So what do I got here? 5 of them. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if I were to break 100% into 10 equal pieces, that would be 10%. So what I'm just trying to show you here is that 10% is 1/10 of 100 because there's 10 tens in 100. 10% therefore is equivalent to 1/10. 1/10. And that wonderful, fabulous trick, taking 1/10, again, is just breaking something into 10 equal pieces. So that means that you're really just dividing by 10. This is the best trick ever. Really, really, because dividing by 10 is easier than dividing by 2, than dividing by 4, any of the things we've done before. Let me show you what I mean. Like if you had 80 divided by 10, I bet you guys know how many tens are there in 80? Well, there's just 8. A lot of students think of that as losing a 0, and that's kind of an okay way to think about it. Let's try another one. Let's try like 200 divided by 10. And you tell me, okay, well, yeah, I just lost a 0 again, 20. But what if it was a number that didn't have a 0 at the end? Like, could you quickly and easily divide 45 by 10? Turns out you sure could. It wasn't zeros that I was losing. What I was losing was decimal places. When I divide 80 by 10, I lose a decimal place. 200 by 10, I lose a decimal place. So same thing here. So imagine I have a decimal place right here and it jumps. I end up with it right here. Now, in the case of 80 and 200, when they lose a decimal place, I don't need to write like 8.0 because 8.0 means the same as 8. But in this case, the decimal matters. It's a non-zero decimal. So I just say 45 divided by 10 is 4.5. 63 divided by 10 is 6.3. So see how we can quickly and easily divide by 10 in our heads? So we can divide by 10 by moving a decimal place. And when I say moving, I'm losing a decimal place. I'm going left. Why left? So that I'll have less value. Okay, so moving a decimal place. Okay, good. Now that we understand that, let's practice with 10% because you're like, Kate, you told me the video was going to be about 10%, not dividing by 10. So let's take a look. Here, I want you to imagine that I was taking 10% of 40. Well, like we said, 10% is equivalent to, oh, I forgot the word of. There you go, guys, 10% of 40. So, like I said, 10% is equivalent to dividing by 10 because there's 10 tens and 100. And so I can just lose that decimal place. And in the case where it's a 0, it will just drop. So 10% of 40 is 4. Let's try 10% of 3,600. What if it's big and nasty? Again, super simple. I'm just going to lose my little decimal place. And 10% of 3,600 is 360. Okay. Again, don't get miffed if it doesn't have a 0 at the end. So let's do 10% of 67. We're just going to move that decimal place over 1. Boom, 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 boom. And remember, decimals are on the back when you don't see them because they're after the ones place. And so I get 6.7. Let me erase this so it doesn't look like 10% of 6.7 is 6.7. Okay. Great. Let's do one that already has a decimal because sometimes that throws students. Like what would 10% of 0.24 be? Once again, 10% is quickly done by just dividing by 10, losing one decimal place. So start with the decimal right where it is and jump left to lose so that I'll get a smaller value. And so 10% of 0.24 or 24 hundredths would be 0.024. See how I lost value there by moving my decimal left. I got something even smaller. So the super cool implication of this little trick is that I can not only use it to find 10%, I could use it to find 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, any multiple of 10, really, if you think about it. So I use this all the time to find tip. I don't know how many of you guys go out to eat, but when you do, if you've had good service, people often recommend you tip 20%. And so it's super easy to figure out 20% using this little 10% trick we found. Would you agree with me that 20% is the same as 2 10%? 10 and 10 would give me 20. So 20% is the same as 2 10%. Okay, because of that, I can just find the 10% and double it. Let me show you. Let's pretend that I went to a restaurant and my bill was $60. Obviously, I'm a teacher. I don't get to do that very often, but hey, a girl can dream. Okay, so I have the $60 bill at the restaurant. So I already know how I could find 10%, right? I would just lose my decimal. So if I wanted 10%, that'd be $6. But I don't want 10%. I want 20%. I want 2 of these, so I'll double that. 12. And so I really quickly, by losing a decimal place, so that's the first thing, lose a decimal place, and then double it, double your answer, I can find 20% super quickly in my head. So let's take a not quite so easy restaurant bill. Let's pretend that my bill was like $44.50. Is my trick still going to work? Well, absolutely it will. First of all, let's do the 10%. So we're going to move that decimal over. And if I were just tipping 10%, I'd give them $4.45. Again, there's no reason for trailing zeros here. And anyway, we don't ever use 3 numbers in, or 3 decimal places in money. That wouldn't even make sense to us. But now I have $4.45. But that's just 10%, so I need to double it. Now, I could multiply it by 2, but remember, I'm trying to do this in my head. I often think it's easier to add in my head, but it's the same thing. And I find out that I should tip them $8.90. Okay. So like I said, it doesn't have to just be 20%. You could use it really to find any multiple. So I'll do one more example. Let's imagine that I was asked to find 40%. Maybe they're having a 40% off sale at your favorite store, and those shoes you've been eyeballing for forever are $58. Are you going to be able to afford them now? So let's take a look at how to find 40% of 58. Well, again, I could start with that 10 trick. I could just move that over once. That would give me 10%. So 10% would be $5.80. But I'm not looking for 10%. I'm looking for 40%. And I ask you, how many tens is that? Let's think about it. 10, 20, 30, 40. That's 4 tens. So I'm going to need 4 10%. And isn't it neat? We can just play with numbers like this, y'all. Deconstruct them, recompose them. And I find out that if I'm taking 40% of 58, I'm saving $23.20 here. That's some big savings. Oh, girls, I'm going to buy those shoes.